Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The driving rain hammered the asphalt, transforming the streets of Washington, D.C., into glittering mirrors of the red and blue neon lights of patrol cars. Officer Jason Miller, 38, a police officer known for his arrogance and racial prejudice, drove alone in his patrol car. His hands gripping the steering wheel, he observed the crowd of passers-by, searching for any pretext to assert his authority. That's when he spotted Angela Carter, a tall, slender black woman wearing a dark trench coat and carrying a black leather handbag. Her bearing was confident, almost regal, and despite the rain, she walked with a brisk, purposeful stride. Miller immediately felt his irritation rising. Why is this woman allowed to walk here at this hour, he thought. Without considering the consequences, he activated his sirens and signaled Angela to pull over. She looked up at him fearlessly, her brown eyes shining with cold intelligence. She was no ordinary citizen. Her official, secret identity was captain in the CIA, on a classified mission. But Miller knew nothing of that. To him, she was simply a black woman who needed to be arrested. Angela stopped calmly, placed her bag on the ground, and crossed her arms, observing Miller. Her composure contrasted sharply with Miller's agitation as he got out of his car, arrogant and condescending. He approached, thinking he could intimidate her, but Angela didn't move. As he was about to give a stupid order, she discreetly pulled out her phone and sent a coded message to her superiors at the CIA. Every move, every word, every gesture would be recorded by the neighborhood surveillance systems. Miller didn't yet know that what he thought was a routine arrest would trigger a series of catastrophic events, humiliating revelations, professional losses, and public exposure. That simple rainy evening would become the moment his life changed forever, and when Angela, the woman he thought was ordinary, would take complete control of the situation. The tone was set. Between arrogance, power, and imminent karma, this confrontation would exceed all expectations. The rain fell relentlessly, transforming Washington, D.C. into a theater of red and blue reflections. Angela Carter walked with a firm step, her soaked trench coat clinging slightly to her skin. She had just completed a sensitive mission for the CIA, and all she wanted was to go home. Suddenly, a siren wailed behind her. Officer Jason Miller had activated his flashing lights. Without hesitation, he signaled her to stop. Angela looked up, already accustomed to handling unpredictable situations, and calmly pulled over. Miller got out of his car, his boots splashing in the puddles. His face was red with anger and frustration. "Madam, you must identify yourself and explain what you are doing here at this hour," he ordered in an authoritative voice. Angela replied calmly, almost icily. "Of course, officer, but may I ask on what basis you are calling me?" Miller frowned, irritated by the question. "Don't you see that you're behaving suspiciously?" he spat. Angela remained impassive. Inside her bag, her phone vibrated. A coded message from the CIA reminded her that she had to remain undercover until the situation was under control. She discreetly activated the recording of the conversation on her device. Every word Miller said would be documented. Passers-by began to stop, intrigued by the altercation. Miller, feeling the onlookers' gaze, tried to regain control, but his arrogance began to waver in the face of Angela's unwavering calm. He didn't yet know that she could, in an instant, summon resources he had never imagined. An electric tension hung in the air. This arrest, which Miller thought would be easy, was about to turn against him in an unpredictable way. The first step toward his downfall had just been taken. Miller, frustrated by Angela's composure, moved even closer. Rain fell on his face, but he didn't feel it, consumed by his anger. "I order you to produce your identification," he shouted, hoping to assert his authority. Angela remained motionless, looking him straight in the eyes. "Officer, I am ready to cooperate, if you can explain to me precisely the reason for this arrest." Her voice was soft, but every word vibrated with power and control. Miller groaned and tried to rummage through his bag, expecting to find something suspicious. But just as his hand reached out, Angela made a subtle gesture. Her phone vibrated again. A coded message from the CIA signaled that the situation was critical and that she needed to take control immediately. In a fraction of a second, Angela activated a discreet video recording and simultaneously sent a message to her direct superior. Incident underway with a racist police officer. Intervene discreetly. A few seconds later, an unmarked CIA vehicle appeared around the corner. Passers-by, already intrigued, began to murmur, while Miller looked around, perplexed. His sirens and authority suddenly seemed ridiculous. Taking advantage of the element of surprise, Angela calmly produced her CIA badge, finally revealing her identity. Miller's face paled instantly when he recognized the official symbol. He had thought he was arresting an ordinary citizen, and instead, he found himself facing a CIA captain, armed with resources he hadn't even dared to imagine. Officer Miller. Angela said with icy calm, I think you now understand the gravity of the situation. Miller stepped back, anger giving way to fear. He had underestimated this woman. What he thought would be a routine arrest was turning into his own public humiliation. Angela, still calm, ordered. Stay in your place, or you risk very serious consequences. The wind and rain were beating harder, as if to emphasize the storm that had just hit Miller's career. Miller's face turned ashen. He never would have imagined finding himself face to face with a CIA agent like this, in the rain, in the middle of the street. Passers-by had gathered at a distance, some taking out their phones to film the scene. Every word he uttered now risked being recorded and shared. Angela remained perfectly calm. She knew exactly how to handle the situation without losing control. Officer Miller, I advise you to remain calm. Her voice left no room for negotiation. Unable to bear the humiliation, Miller attempted a defiant gesture and pulled out his own phone to call for police backup. But he didn't know that all his calls were now being monitored by Angela. In a few moments, his superior would receive a detailed report on his racist behavior and abuse of power. Angela then produced her official badge, brandishing it with icy authority. Officer Miller. She said slowly, you are committing a serious offense. I am authorized to document every action you take tonight. Miller instinctively stepped back, but there was nowhere to hide. The CIA had already taken control of the situation. A few plainclothes agents appeared at a distance, silently observing, ready to intervene if necessary. A passerby dared to whisper, "It's the CIA," and the word spread like wildfire through the crowd. Miller's arrogance turned to panic. He had underestimated Angela and her position. Finally, he slowly lowered his hands, humiliated, unable to utter a word. Angela, still serene, gestured towards her bag. The phone was recording every moment. Tonight, Officer Miller, you will learn a lesson you will never forget, she concluded calmly. As the rain continued to fall, he realized that this simple stop would mark the beginning of his downfall. His career, his image, and his reputation were now in the hands of the woman he had thought he could intimidate. Karma had just struck, and Angela, unperturbed, had taken total control of the situation. The next morning, Jason Miller woke up with a lingering sense of unease. Images and videos of the confrontation in the rain were already circulating on internal police networks and, in certain restricted circles, had even reached CIA offices. His superior, Captain Richard Hayes, called him immediately. The voice on the phone was cold, almost glacial. "Miller, I just saw the recordings of your behavior last night. You need to see me at the office immediately." The journey to the police station was made in a heavy silence. Each red light seemed to last forever, as if the city itself was slowing down to emphasize its impending defeat. At the station, Richard Hayes was waiting for him, accompanied by an internal officer in charge of disciplinary matters. "Miller," Hayes began, "I have rarely seen such inappropriate behavior. Your arrogance and discrimination will lead to an official investigation." Miller opened his mouth to protest, but changed his mind when he saw the evidence. The video recording and the witness testimonies were irrefutable. Even the most loyal colleagues looked away, not wanting to be involved in this scandal. Meanwhile, Angela Carter, back at the CIA, had already submitted a detailed official report. Her status, the abuses of power, and Miller's racist incident were all documented in the file. She didn't need personal revenge, law and order would take care of that for her. Miller, his face contorted and his hands trembling, realized he had underestimated not only Angela, but also the system that protected agents like her. For the first time, he felt fear and utter humiliation. As the internal investigation began and police officials reviewed his file, Miller realized that his career, reputation, and authority had just crumbled in a matter of hours. The woman he had tried to intimidate had not only gained the upper hand but had orchestrated his downfall with military precision. Karma had not only struck, it had settled permanently in his life. A few days after the incident, Jason Miller began to realize the extent of his fall. Videos of his racist behavior and his confrontation with Angela Carter were already circulating within police circles, and some local media outlets had even begun to report on the case under the guise of an anonymous leak. At the station, his colleagues avoided his gaze. Those who had once supported him now turned away, fearing that his name would tarnish their own reputations. Miller was alone, humiliated in the silence of his superiors. Angela, for her part, remained relentless. She had sent an official report to the CIA's top brass and the city police. Every detail, every word and gesture of Miller's was meticulously documented. She hadn't even needed to threaten or seek revenge, the law and protocol took care of him. One morning, Miller received an official letter. He was suspended from his duties until further notice. The letter detailed his abusive and racist behavior, his breach of procedural rules, and the risk his presence posed to the police and the community. His social life also began to crumble. His friends, some connected to the police and others to his personal circle, were distancing themselves. Every message, every call seemed laden with implicit judgment. Even his family sensed the weight of the humiliation. For the first time, Miller understood what it truly meant to lose control. The woman he had once considered weak and ordinary had exposed him beyond repair. Anger and frustration were now giving way to fear and shame. Angela, meanwhile, carried on with her activities as if nothing had happened. For her, it was just an ordinary workday. Justice and karma had done their work. Miller, on the other hand, had to face the collapse of his career and reputation, and he knew there was no going back. A week after the incident, Jason Miller found himself at the center of a storm he never could have imagined. Local media, alerted by internal leaks, began circulating the video of his confrontation with Angela Carter. The clip went viral in some professional circles, clearly showing his racist and abusive behavior. At the police station, the atmosphere was icy. His colleagues eyed him suspiciously, and even his superiors couldn't ignore the mounting pressure from municipal authorities and outraged citizens. Every conversation seemed to revolve around him, every meeting a reminder of his humiliation. Angela, for her part, had taken meticulous precautions to remain discreet but completely in control. The coded messages she had sent to her superiors had triggered a full investigation into Miller's abuse of power. The CIA, while remaining discreet, asserted that the evidence was solid and irrefutable. Miller began receiving unexpected visitors. Representatives from the police inspector general came to question his colleagues and witnesses. Even his friends outside the station, who had previously supported him, were distancing themselves. Every conversation, every smile he received seemed tinged with silent contempt. For the first time, Miller felt the true weight of his actions. His career was suspended, his reputation tarnished, and the whole world seemed to have turned its back on his arrogance. The once confident and dominant police officer had become vulnerable, exposed, and humiliated, unable to regain control. Meanwhile, Angela continued her missions undisturbed. She needed no direct confrontation. The system, which she knew better than anyone, had dealt with Miller. She had transformed her quiet power into implacable justice, demonstrating that even those who abuse their authority can be neutralized without direct violence. Miller, sitting alone in his apartment, relived that confrontation over and over again in the rain. The rain now fell metaphorically on his career and his pride. Everything he had built seemed to be dissolving like puddles on the asphalt. A few days after Miller's suspension, the city police officially announced the opening of a disciplinary investigation against him. The accusations included abuse of power, discriminatory behavior, and violation of official procedures. Every word Miller spoke in the rain, every gesture recorded by Angela Carter, now served as irrefutable evidence against him. Miller was summoned to an internal hearing room. His superiors, members of the Inspector General, and civilian representatives were already waiting for him. He felt his heart race. The gravity of the situation hit him like a storm. Angela, for her part, did not appear. Her presence was unnecessary, her strength lay in the evidence and the credibility of her position. But everyone knew that she had been the indirect instigator of this crackdown. The recordings she had made and the coded messages sent to her superiors had orchestrated Miller's downfall methodically and irreversibly. The chairman of the disciplinary committee took the floor. "Officer Miller, after reviewing your conduct, it appears that you acted with bias, abused your authority, and endangered public confidence in our police force." Miller tried to defend himself, stammering out excuses that sounded hollow. He attempted to justify his behavior by citing stress and fatigue, but no one paid any attention. Every word Angela spoke in the rain had been recorded, verified, and corroborated by independent witnesses. The final decision came like a bolt from the blue: Miller was dismissed from the police force. His career was over, and he now faced legal consequences if he continued to act inappropriately in other contexts. The shock was profound. For the first time in his life, he was powerless, exposed, and humiliated in front of those he believed to be his superiors and colleagues. Outside, the rain was falling again, as if to remind Miller of the fateful scene that had triggered his downfall. Angela, meanwhile, continued her work with the serenity of those who know that justice, sometimes, can be silent but inevitable. Miller finally understood that his arrogance and racism had led to a complete loss of control. The woman he had underestimated had not only survived his attack, but had orchestrated his downfall with ruthless precision. A few weeks after his dismissal, Jason Miller's situation became even more public. Videos of his confrontation with Angela Carter had been circulated on social media and in some local news outlets, albeit under a confidentiality agreement. The footage clearly showed his abusive and racist behavior, and Miller's name began to circulate in professional and civic circles. His already distant colleagues at the police force now avoided all contact. Even friends he thought were loyal kept their distance, fearing his tarnished reputation would affect them as well. The contemptuous glances and whispers reminded him constantly that he had lost all credibility. Local and national organizations publicly denounced his actions, while some citizens organized petitions demanding a more thorough investigation and further sanctions. Miller, who once saw himself as a representative of authority, was now a symbol of corruption and racism within the police force. Angela, for her part, followed the situation from afar. She didn't need to show herself. Her mission was accomplished. Her reputation, integrity, and professionalism were intact, while Miller crumbled under the weight of his own arrogance. The isolated police officer, forced into humility, understood that his life would never be the same. The woman he had tried to intimidate had not only defended her dignity but had also exposed his behavior irrefutably and publicly. Every mention of his name in the media and on social networks was another blow to his ego. The lesson was clear: underestimating someone because of their skin color or appearance could lead to disastrous and irreversible consequences. Miller had learned, the hard way, that power could be used to protect, not to crush. The rain, a recurring symbol of this confrontation, now seemed to follow his fall wherever he went, a reminder that his arrogance and racism had led to his professional and social destruction. A few months after the incident, Jason Miller wandered like a broken man. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, and even his personal relationships were affected by shame. He had tried to rebuild his life, but every attempt seemed doomed to failure. One morning, he received an official letter from the CIA, a summons for a meeting with Angela Carter. His heart sank. After everything he had been through, the thought of seeing the woman he had underestimated again stirred a deep fear. They found themselves in a neutral, dimly lit room, devoid of an audience. Angela, impeccable in her captain's uniform, looked at him with icy calm. Miller, half trembling, didn't know where to put his hands. "Officer Miller," Angela said calmly, I assume you now understand the impact of your actions. Miller lowered his eyes. He wanted to speak, to explain, to justify himself, but no words could undo what had been done. Angela continued. What you did was not only illegal, but deeply immoral. You abused your power, underestimated others, and violated public trust. Each word hit Miller like a hammer blow. He felt shame wash over him, stronger than ever. He had believed that fear and intimidation could give him control, but Angela had used intelligence, composure, and the system to neutralize him. You had the chance to change things, Angela added, but your choices led you to this situation. Miller remained silent. The final confrontation required no shouting or violence. The simple face-to-face encounter, imbued with truth and moral power, would suffice to mark his defeat forever. Angela slowly turned on her heel, leaving Miller alone with his shame, aware that his downfall was not just professional, but total. The woman he had wanted to humiliate had triumphed without raising her voice, and he had finally understood that true power lies in self-control, justice, and integrity. A few weeks after their final confrontation, Jason Miller had become an isolated and discredited figure. His career in law enforcement was definitively over, and the reputation he had built through arrogance and intimidation was irretrievably destroyed. Every attempt at reinstatement or justification was thwarted by the wall of evidence that Angela Carter had carefully left behind. Angela, for her part, continued her mission at the CIA, unflappable and focused. The incident had reinforced her conviction that vigilance and professionalism were her best weapons. She had acted with precision, using the law, procedure, and her intelligence to neutralize an individual who could have harmed others. Her calm and composure had transformed a moment of potential danger into a powerful lesson in justice and karma. For Miller, each day was a reminder of his downfall. The media and social networks continued to mention the incident, now presenting it as an example of abuse of power and institutional racism. Colleagues and former friends avoided all interaction. He had lost everything: authority, respect, and pride. But this story wasn't just about Miller's downfall. It was also about the quiet power of justice exercised with wisdom and composure. Angela had demonstrated that true authority lies not in fear or intimidation, but in competence, integrity, and self-control. As she walked through the rain again a few weeks later, Angela felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing the injustice had been righted. She hadn't sought personal revenge, only to let truth and the law take their course. The rain fell on Washington, D.C., as if to wash away the traces of arrogance and make way for justice. Miller, for his part, had to rebuild his life from scratch, knowing that some mistakes can never be erased. Karma, justice, and truth had conspired against him, and he could never again underestimate the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth and power. The story ended like this: a humiliated police officer, a destroyed career, but above all, the demonstration that a single person, armed with courage and integrity, can reverse the course of injustice with precision and mastery.